Today on Homeworthy, we're visiting a beautiful colonial home in Sharon, Connecticut, where we'll meet Dana and Fritz Rohn of Montage Antiques. Once in need of desperate repair, Dana and Fritz have spent the past several years renovating their home and decorating it with fabulous treasures. As passionate collectors for the past 40 years, the couple has accumulated wonderful antiques, everything from impressive works of art, some of which Fritz has painted himself, to worldly objects. Enjoy!
Hi, Homeworthy. I'm Dana.
And I'm Fritz.
Welcome to our beautiful colonial home in Connecticut. Come on in.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
Hi, I'm Dana Jennings Rohn. We're here at this wonderful house that we've renovated in Sharon, Connecticut, and we've filled it with antiques.
And I am Fritz Rohn, Dana's husband, and very happy to be living in this beautiful house. We are in the antiques business and buy and sell antiques and love what we do, and we love old beautiful things and have collected many over the years and
Loads.
Have them in this house.
So I found this house because I'm a complete real estate-aholic. I can't let a house go by without looking at it, and I'm constantly scrolling on my phone looking at different opportunities around the area. And this one came on the market and it was a wreck, and we immediately jumped on it. It was just such an exciting moment. And as you can see, Lizzie is fascinated by the whole story, aren't you, dear?
When we first came to the house, we knew immediately that we loved it. We've always loved these early houses. They just have so much character and charm. And when you see one that is in really a dilapidated state, your heart cries out. You really feel like you have to do something. And we also just knew that the location was wonderful. It has a wonderful view out the back. It's on a quiet road. The house sits prominently high with a stone retaining wall in front, complete with stone gate posts and two of the ubiquitous aged sugar maple trees in front. It was just an iconic New England country house.
However, it was in horrible condition, as I said earlier. And one of my favorite stories about when we first bought the house, we decided to have an empty house party. So we invited all our friends, and we invited our friend Rebecca, who was our realtor. She's a very dear friend. And she and I and our other friend, Natalie, were standing in what was an upstairs bedroom, all of us with glasses of wine. And we were just chatting away, and suddenly the floor gave way, and Rebecca, the realtor, went right through the floor, and her foot came out in the living room. The thing about this house was the last time that it got a good do-over was in the 80s. And they put on a kind of ubiquitous sunroom, and they decorated with lots of, avocado and harvest gold, and you get the picture. There was weird faded wallpaper, and there were lots of eagles involved. So it was pretty tacky and also incredibly tired. In the kitchen there was a chandelier that didn't have any shades, and they had little plastic cups over the bulbs. So it was also kind of scary.
This room here, the front hall, we actually did not have to do much in. It was dilapidated. An alteration that they had done was to have the closet put here, only it was way out here, and it was an enormous space filled with heat ducts. So one thing that we did is to push this wall back and make the front hall larger and more gracious, and still keep a closet, but give it kind of a jib door, to which I have wonderfully found a 19th century gilt mirror that fit it perfectly, but it still is a wonderfully spacious closet, but quite hidden, so that it's still a gracious front hall and large enough for a piece of furniture here, because formerly it was only this deep. So it enlarged this room wonderfully. and we also did the carpeting. This is one room where the floor was not in very good condition, and so we have carpeted it and the stairway with sisal, which works very well.
It also keeps the dogs from falling down the stairs.
Yes, always very important.
So we made a kind of funny decision in the very beginning. We'd always used Benjamin Moore paints, and we decided to try Faro and Ball. So as we walk around the house, you'll see we love a solid light color wall, and we like a contrasting trim. And so we chose all those colors from Faro and Ball, and perhaps I'll be able to remember the actual names of the colors or not. Anyway, my favorite part of this whole ensemble is the console and my beautiful lute player. The console is Italian, it's about 1780, and I just love all this beautiful original decorative paint. It's hard to find this stuff, it really is. And this is just perfectly scaled for this room. And she is just the epitome of who I want to be. She is so gracious and so peaceful and so creative with her beautiful gesture of her hand and those beautiful drapes.
It is a wonderful portrait, English, 1720, 1730, and I love its life size. It really is a real personality in the room. And although it's in a bit rough shape, it's got some discoloration here and some flaking here, it doesn't bother me a bit. She's got great character. She is alert, lively, with her wonderful hairdo interspersed with a rope of pearls and this beautiful lute, and her fingers are so beautifully done. A curious thing is that, and you don't notice it because it is mostly finished, but it is in fact not completely finished. If you look closely, you can see how the lute is completely a flat color compared with the fine modulation of the hands. And you can see he never got to the lute to give it any kind of color, any gesture, any sense of the nature of the wood that it is made out of. It is certainly unfinished. But the important parts are the hands, the face, the beautiful fabrics, the bit of light in the distance. It's a wonderful thing and really evocative of that period. We do love portraits. This is a series of 18th century prints of self-portraits of artists, which I've been collecting for I don't know how many years, 40 or 50 years, and they're rare. You don't find very many. I think I've got about 30 of them now.
Most of them are in the closet.
And they were put out by the Uffizi Museum in the 1700s. They are hand-colored copper plate engravings. And the Uffizi has an incredible collection of these paintings that were of self-portraits of artists, which of course is a wonderful theme. And they have been collecting them since the 1600s. And in the 18th century, they did this series of prints, and you don't find many of them, but they're beautiful things, and they're a pleasure to have.
And Fritz found lots.
The tapestry that you see here, this long, narrow panel, is actually an amalgam. It's an interesting thing that was done in the early part of the 20th century, where they would take fragments of very fine bits of tapestry which had been cut off or rotted off, and these are sections, and they pieced them together. So you can see this is a beautiful figure here. It looks like it's autumn with the scythe to cut hay with, but it ends here, and this is another figure here, flanked by two caryatid figures, and yet it's interspersed very artfully here to all this floral aspect, which is a border piece from another tapestry. And way down at the bottom, we have even another wonderful piece. And this one is from the late 1500s. And it's these two figures in Elizabethan dress walking in a woodland landscape with a bit of a caryatid figure along the right-hand side here, and you can see at the top where it is artfully stitched together at the bottom of yet another piece with a figure which has nothing to do with it. His waist ends here, but it makes a wonderful object to have, and there is nothing like the tones of these early needleworks. The wonderful soft hues are just beautiful.
So I think we've seen a lot of the front hall. I think it's time for us to move into the living room, which is chock full of stuff. Come on.
And it's a beautiful room.
So here we are in the living room. Now, It's really full of stuff. And the reason it's full of stuff is because we are antique dealers. We have been collecting for, about 40 years, I think, together.
At least.
And separately before that, we've been in the antiques business since 1987 in various iterations and incarnations around the general vicinity here. We've had a number of different shops and we used to do shows and all kinds of things. So we're old hat at that. And the big thing about our house is that the decorating stems from the collecting. So the first thing that you notice is that we have tons of stuff on all the shelves. It's because we're passionate about various things. We have such a wide-ranging interest. And so they're different collections of stuff in different places, and they've come from all over, and we've collected them over years and years of just passionate collecting, as well as we're in the business, so we have a lot of opportunity too.
And even though we do love things and we do fill our houses with all these wonderful things, I always want to keep in mind that every room has to be comfortable and lived in. Every chair has to be very comfortable. We especially love these wonderful down cushion upholstered pieces where you really can just be very comfortable and sit, although we don't actually sit that much. We're always very busy.
We joke about we're chair farmers. We collect chairs, but we never sit down.
We work very hard. We love what we do.
Yeah.
And the result is that we do end up spending a lot of time working, but it's what happens when you love what you're doing.
It's a pleasure.
But even though you collect all these things, you do need to keep your house being a wonderful place to live that you're comfortable in, where your friends can come in and not be afraid to sit down and lounge in a chair. That's important. You have to be able to enjoy your day.
Yeah, and there's a certain edit to what we do. I mean, as we get further into it, you'll get a sense of, it isn't just a random array. There's such a big movement right now for maximalism, and I kind of have a problem with that, because it's almost like having your house be full of stuff for the sake of having your house be full of stuff, which is different than what we do. What we do is that we actually curate our collections. And yes, it is densely decorated, but that is because we have been doing this for so long and we're so passionate. And so those kinds of movements, minimalism, maximalism, that's kind of a superficial way of looking at interior design. I think that for people who are visual, who love art, it goes way deeper than that.
Another thing that I think is interesting to point out, and that is that although we do love antiques and old things, we do have some modern art and modern things around.
Absolutely.
And you can mix them successfully, but you have to think about how you do it. For instance, if we might just take a look over here, amidst all our old master paintings, there's this wonderful, very abstract 20th century painting done by an old friend of mine, but the tones go with the room. The figure is a human size, it's a scale, it goes with other things. Contemporary painting of brilliant colors would not do well in this room. It would do well in perhaps our sunroom, which has more brilliant colors. But it's not merely using antique things. You also have to pay attention to bringing modern things in, or anything that you love. I love the painting, which is why it's here. But you have it in a place where it goes with the room. So maximalism is a way of adding all these things together that go in the scheme of the whole room, although they may be hundreds of years apart in their making and in a different style. And that's a very important thing in decorating a room, I find.
One of the things about colonial homes in their original state is that they were a series of small rooms. And the difference in this house is that at some point, probably in the 20th century, walls were removed, which caused this living room to be one room. It's very likely that it was 3 rooms, maybe only 2, but probably 3. And so when we were making the designs for the room and sort of the traffic flow and the seating areas, we really thought about it as 3 different spaces. So at this end, we have sort of a library feeling. We have our game table, which sometimes doubles as a kind of intimate dinner party scene. And we use this space all the time. You know, when we have big family parties, there are people here playing cards or doing puzzles. And we can clear it out, we can add chairs, and it's actually my favorite place for a winter dinner with another couple, because it's very intimate and it's close to the fireplace and it's really cozy. So then we come to the middle section of the living room, and we have our fireplace. And so we've created this kind of seating area around the fireplace. So this in some way really functions as the main heart of our living room. It's a wonderful cozy spot. We put hors d'oeuvres on the table and everybody kind of gathers around the fireplace. We've designed it this way because the room didn't work well using it in larger chunks. It made sense to divide the room into 3 unique spaces. And down in this end is actually what I like to think of as Fritz's office or library. That's Fritz's desk over there. And he's a book collector, among many other things. And so all of that is here. And this really functions as a completely separate space.
Works beautifully with a wonderful view of the yard outside, and it faces south so the sun pours in. So we do love these old master paintings, and we have collected many over the years. This one here is actually one from my family. This is something my parents bought when I was a child. And it's interesting because it's an 18th century copy of a great Rubens painting. Rubens did a series of, I think it's about 20 paintings of Marie de Medici, which are now in the Louvre. And this is one of hers where she is fleeing Marseille. And he was so revered in the 18th and 19th centuries, Rubens was, that many artists did copies of his paintings. This, of course, was in the years before photography. So this is a version of Marie de Medici Fleeing Marseille by Rubens, done about 100 years later than Rubens painted it. He painted it in the 1620s, and I've always loved it. And we did put an 18th century frame on it, which it did not have earlier, but it really places it quite nicely together.
As you might imagine, as antique dealers, we gift each other antiques all the time. So every birthday, Christmas, whatever holiday, anniversary, one of us has something really marvelous to give to the other. So on this particular year, I was shopping with our daughters at a big antique fair, and I came upon this Egyptian foot. It's from an Egyptian tomb. It's a really wonderful carved wood piece with gesso, just the kind of thing you would find at the Met. And I was very excited, and I bought it to give to Fritz for his birthday. And I packed it away, and everybody was very excited about this purchase. So then, on Christmas morning, it was my turn to open a present from Fritz. And I unwrapped the box, I pulled the tissue out, and the girls were sitting here with us, and what should I pull out of the box but a pair of Egyptian feet that Fritz had bought for me because he knew I like antiquities. The girls and I were absolutely bursting, trying not to laugh. Both of our daughters were just, winking at me and chuckling, and I was like, shh, shh, quiet, stop. Finally, we got ourselves under control. Now, Fritz's birthday is 2 days after Christmas, so you can imagine my delight, actually double delight, in having him open this one. Because how many people come up with Egyptian feet for each other's presents in the same year? So the story of Fritz and our meeting is kind of amusing. We weren't antique dealers at that time, although we did both love going to flea markets. But I was baking desserts in my apartment kitchen, and Fritz was the chef at a restaurant where I happened to be selling my desserts at the back door. And this particular Memorial Day weekend, I came in with all of my torts and pies, and the manager was paying me out the back door, and he said, "Do you want to meet the chef?" I said, sure. So we walked into the kitchen, and behind the hotline, looking a bit stressed out, was this adorable man with this huge head of curly hair and a huge beard and these little round glasses, and he was as skinny as a rail. And he looked at me, and the manager said, Fritz, this is Dana Jennings. And he blew me a kiss. So that was the fateful moment.
I don't know what came over me. That's not something I don't think I've ever done on a
It's a
first
little
meeting
out of
with
character,
anyone.
I must say.
And it was not, it was kind of across the room, too.
It was through the shelving units where they put the hot dishes up.
I was busy and working away. I mean, I think I had orders to cook, and Dana was over at the other end of the kitchen, and it just seemed the proper response. You
could say something like she was cute, but no, it's just the proper
she
response.
was, obviously. I had always loved antiques and art, and I was raised with nice things in the house, and I was always curious about them and always asked. And actually, I was a painter. I was an artist and was painting, and I was working in restaurants really to pay the bills, as making a living selling art is challenging, and at some point I realized I had sort of painted the paintings I felt I needed to paint and was ready to move on, and so went into the antiques business. But my career in the restaurant kitchens was, although I always have loved to eat well, it was really a way of supporting myself, and my heart was not in it.
Little different for my story. I grew up in the antiques business. My grandparents were dealers. My parents were dealers. So I sort of grew up in the shop. I grew up at the shows. And honestly, I was determined never to be an antique dealer in my 20s. But I loved to cook. So I ended up, going to culinary school and having a series of different jobs, mainly in pastry, but I did a lot of other things. And when we started dating, we spent all our time going to flea markets and going to antique fairs and, kind of buying bits and bobs. And then we decided to get a booth in an antique center, actually, together. We weren't married, but we just thought it would be fun. And that's we were dabbling and we were cooking on the side. And then I remember we bought this really massive colonial house in Goshen, Connecticut. And Fritz said to me, I just really want to be a full-time antique dealer. So for a little while, I was still cooking and he was building our business. It really sprung from there. It really did. Fritz was very passionate, and we had a couple of different shops, first in our house, and then we moved our shop down to Woodbury, Connecticut, where we were for over 20 years, right?
20
long
years,
time.
good 20 years.
And during that time, I was really busy raising our two daughters, and I was sort of on the fringe involved in the business, and Fritz was absolutely full-time and built it into a wonderful, wonderful business. It was, full of all these kinds of early things that we love. It just was an amazing life. It was a lifestyle choice as much as a passion, and we were very lucky. We've always felt very lucky. So this is our sunroom, and it's actually my favorite room of the house. I just love the light in here at all times of day, and it's where we sit and have our tea in the morning, and later in the day we can sort of lounge out or take a nap on the couch. And also, it's a great place to have dinner parties because we have this enormous table, and it's a very open and sort of inviting space.
It's also a place to keep things, of course, knowing us. Right here we have a batch of things which are all basically classically inspired. There are some ancient things. This is an ancient Hellenistic period figurine, terracotta figurine, but wonderful drapery on it, but it is an ancient object. This is a 17th century marble carved statue. Diana with the crescent moon on her forehead is the emblem of Diana, the huntress. But it's wonderful. It's 17th or early 18th century. Probably Italian. And this is a plaster bust of Ariadne, but it's all classical themed here, various little bits and pieces. This is a bronze, an early 19th century Grand Tour bronze of Hercules. It's a very famous model, and this is a reduced copy of it. And this is another, I think this is a Diana as well, actually. Or maybe it's Aphrodite adjusting her sandal. Again, an early 19th century bronze. But they're evocative of the ancient Rome, which is wonderful.
So I wanted to introduce you to these portraits. These are our two daughters, Chloe and Phoebe. My grandmother, as I mentioned, was an antique dealer, but she also had an art gallery. And she was very keen on portraits. So as I was growing up, she had many commissions of portraits of our family. And one day we went to visit, the girls and I, and they were just of a certain age. And suddenly, Omi, my grandmother, said to me, "Oh my gosh, we have to have the girls painted now." And literally, she picked up the telephone and called a portrait artist that she knew in Woodstock, New York, because that's where she lived, and had the woman come over that very day. And the woman started taking some sort of scout photos of the girls out in the field and, you know, kind of developed the concept and decided that it should be a little pre-Raphaelite feeling. And so over the next month or so, we went over several times for her to have the girls sit for these portraits. And they're actually two parts of a diptych. And my grandmother wanted to commission it this way so that for our lifetimes, we could have them together, but then going forward, the girls would each have their own portrait that were connected by the tree. It's just a lovely story, and they're beautiful portraits.
Another story, which I think is a wonderful serendipitous situation that happened in the making of the two portraits of our daughters, Chloe and Phoebe, is that they were posed in the attire that had been chosen for them, outdoors with the apple tree, for photographs from which the paintings would be done. But during the posing section, while the artist was taking photographs of them, what should happen but a deer wandered into the scene in the background to eat the apples. So both girls had to turn and look at the deer, creating this wonderful vignette photograph, which is a combination of both the poised and the candid, which I think is a wonderful mix of the two.
Earlier, Fritz was talking about how he was a painter when I first met him, and I thought it would be really interesting for you to see one of his works, which is right over here. So this is a painting that Fritz did in the not too distant past, but nevertheless, he doesn't seem to paint anymore.
I paint occasionally, but not very often. I did this about 6 or 8 years ago, one winter when we had time, and I did some of these abstract Cubism-inspired paintings, and it fit really well in this room. Again, going back to what I said before earlier, using modern things is something we all should do. You fill your house with the things that have meaning for you. There are two other modern paintings here as well, and these are by a man named Richard Beauvais, who is no longer with us. He died, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. But we were brought in as antique dealers to look at the antiques in his house, and we ended up buying a batch of his art. And these two particular ones I loved, and we bought this one, which is actually a self-portrait, which goes with, it's titled here below, and was obviously exhibited with a wonderful label from the 1950s, and its original frame. But it goes with my theme of all the other self-portraits in the front hall, although they are of much earlier painters. It's a wonderful theme, an artist painting an image of themselves. The other one up here is a still life by Richard Beauvais, and it has a plaque about how it won a prize. I guess it's on the reverse. I think it was at the National Academy. He's a wonderful painter, and he never had a gallery. An excellent painter, did beautiful paintings, but never had a gallery and didn't sell his works. He was a teacher, an art teacher at Pratt in New York City for his career.
So we have this amazing Italian lion. One year we took the girls and we went to Italy for a wonderful vacation, and we were in Florence. And because of our interest in faience and Italian pottery, we also went to a lot of the shops where they're making copies of early things. And we just kind of went crazy and fell in love with this guy. It was crazy because we had to ship it home. But we ended up buying a lot of things there, and we sold almost all of it, but we just could not part with him. And whenever I go by, I have to pet him, and sometimes I even tempt fate so he doesn't bite me. So the sunroom sort of seamlessly flows into this back hallway, and it's actually another opportunity for some of our collecting. You can see here on the wall all these portraits of all of us, and it's sort of our little rogues gallery, if you will. These are portraits of our daughters and Fritz and I when we first were married, and then there are some of my grandparents and one of me as a child, all of which were commissioned by various people for us, including a portrait of our old dog, Pippa, which Fritz commissioned for my birthday. And the artist was so taken by our dog that she painted 2 of them. So we have one at each of our houses.
Again, this room has been a wonderful place for showcasing items. This piece of furniture is something from my family, and this is something actually from my grandparents had this. When they were first married on their honeymoon, they went to Italy in about 1921, I think it was, right after World War I. And they bought a whole of this Italian furniture, which I grew up with some of it, including this piece. And actually there's a wonderful photograph in here somewhere of my grandmother with my mother in her arms with this piece of furniture in the side. And the photograph is clearly, I think it's from 1922. My mother was about a year old. But in any case, above it, we have this wonderful carved statue of an angel. And I think it's probably early 17th, possibly late 16th century, carved wooden. Sadly, somebody had it outside for a while, so the paint has disintegrated a great deal, but it has wonderful movement, and I'm sure it is the angel Gabriel, one half of an Annunciation scene. So the Virgin Mary would have been over here with the angel Gabriel announcing to the Virgin Mary that she was going to have the baby Jesus. Story we all know. This is a good collection of American stoneware, all of them with the ovoid shapes, which I love. And I have a collection of these. I've been collecting them for years and years and years. They have such beautiful shapes, all hand-thrown, all different, all handmade, American 1800 to 1840 period. So that's another group of things which we have been buying over the years. They're funny things. They're actually shepherd's crooks, but they are, I don't believe, actually meant to be used. Shepherds would use these things historically to pull a sheep into its flock when the sheep was somewhere that it would not harm the sheep, but yet corral it to the direction that the shepherd wanted it to go. I think this one is a theater prop. It's beautifully made, but it does not seem as though it was really made to be used. And the other one I'm not sure about. It is the same kind of motif, but we don't actually know. These both came from my wife's grandmother, I believe.
Yeah, so my grandmother also loved to put together collections of things. So she had these in her house together with a collection of walking sticks that were always hung on the wall, and they're just a graphically beautiful thing. These walking sticks are very typical kind of American, carved for hikers. Nowadays we have the sort of modified ski pole, but people used to actually, climb up the mountain, kind of with one of these, but they're just so beautifully made. They're so beautifully, kind of turned, and they have a beautiful patina, so they become kind of an art object, really.
And it's interesting to note that some of them, not all of them, have the emblem of the hotel that they were used at, because these were something where you would stay at the hotel and you would borrow these to walk up the mountain, and they would have the emblem. I think this one is Haynes Falls, it says on it.
Yeah. Anyway, all from my grandmother's house.
One thing about the floors in these rooms, which I think is interesting to point out, is that because this section of the house was actually a 1980s addition, the floors were that what I think are a fairly boring, narrow oak board floor, which is very common and very sturdy and a good flooring material, as oak wears very well, but it's a bit of a boring wood. So with the lightness in these rooms, I really wanted to do something a little bit more dramatic and interesting. So I devised painting check floors and demarcating demarcating the rooms with two different schemes. So in the smaller room, I did smaller squares, and this is kind of our back entry, so I didn't want it too formal. So I did the squares on a regular basis, conforming to the room, without a border and without any sort of complication of a diagonal. But as you go into the larger room, I wanted to demarcate it and have it be representative and fit well with the room. So I made the squares a larger size, which goes better with the room, gives a little bit more drama because it matches the scale of the room, and then put them on the diagonal, which just makes it more interesting and a little bit more formal and highly worked. And then did a border around the edge, which also gives it a little bit more formality. And yet using the same color scheme in both rooms, which binds them together visually without there being too much contrast. And speaking about floors, the contrast is very interesting because you go from these rooms, which are very light and airy, into the kitchen with its 18th century floor, with the wonderful early boards here. These are oak here, there's a lot of patching over here, which we had done, which we used old lumber for. But these are the original ones here, with these wide oak boards, where you can see how the nails, with the iron over the years, has created these stains because the iron oxidizes and blackens the wood around it.
Welcome to the kitchen. This is the breezy knoll, I call it. This is where I spend a huge amount of my life with great pleasure cooking. This is another room that was created out of what were probably 2 or 3 rooms in the original colonial house. The walls were already gone again when we bought the house, and so we kind of embraced the idea that we had to make it into separate spaces. So the business end of the kitchen is down here, and we love a C shape. Because when you're a cook that enjoys the process of cooking, you really like that sort of pivot and go, and the workspace works really well that way. It's also really nice because when we have company or family here, everybody can be down at that end, they're not underfoot, and yet I can talk to everybody because everybody loves to be in the kitchen. And so this kind of an arrangement really functions very well. In making the plan for how this room would work, originally this was a solid wall, and the walls were actually barn boards, so the whole room was so dark and dingy. And Fritz had the brilliant idea of getting an old window and actually putting it in this wall to just let in this incredible western light. And it changed the entire room. I mean, it just opened it up. Now we have sunshine pouring in, especially in the late afternoon when the sun sets right through the far windows. So it just completely transformed the kitchen. So another one of the things that I love in the kitchen is our collection of Delftware. You can see all of these big, what we call chargers, because they're larger size rather than plates. And then we have an exceptional collection of Delft tiles. So there are some Delft and some other tiles here, but if you pan around the sink, most of these are 18th century Delft tiles from Holland. We have an enormous collection of Delftware and faience scattered throughout the house. But when we were young collectors and we didn't have a lot of money, we were passionate about Delft, but we couldn't afford the big, beautiful pieces, but we could afford the tiles. So as a result, we have I don't know, what would you say?
Oh, there are a couple hundred.
Couple hundred tiles. We picked sort of some of the best to display, and the rest are in a box in the attic. That's kind of our MO. But anyway, we do enjoy them, and they just lend such richness. Each one is a little vignette, a little story. Sometimes they're religious stories, sometimes they're secular, sometimes they're, you know, a shepherdess with her boobs hanging out. I mean, it's just sort of amazing, the variety of storylines that you find.
One of the things that I really had an idea of when we did the renovations here in the house is to really tie the spaces together and really make the spaces work very well, because none of this had been thought through in the prior renovations of this house. So I picked this big wide cornice molding to run down the whole section of this room and run around. We put the hood in here, but to run around the hood, run around the corner posts, which you see there, and around the corner boards, to tie everything together. So you go from the working part of the kitchen into the dining section, also the section where Dana has her desk, and it ties things together. And then unifying it also with the one color, I think, works very well, and having it be one room and yet two different spaces that still work together but do not isolate each one too much. Moving on from that into the corner cupboards, which were here, although we changed them minorly in order to have them run all the way up to the ceiling, because they only went as high as the windows. My sense was to make the ceiling go up, make the cupboards go up all the way. It brings your eye upward. And then we, of course, filled it with stuff, which is our modus operandi. We have collected all this wonderful stuff over the years from various locations. This is some of our early European faience. There is one Chinese porcelain vase on the top, which actually is from Dana's family. And then this very charming collection of face pictures here from various places. One French, one Persian, one, and both of these are English actually, early creamware, but the faces are really kind of wonderful caricatures and silly in some sense, but evocative as a collection. Beautiful still life painting there of peaches on a wonderful early Chinese plate, and more of our good collection of Delft. A lot of it is broken or repaired, which never bothers me. It's just as old and has been loved and cared for that has been repaired. And I never think of that as being something that is detrimental. We have modern painting in here. I bought a batch, I think it was about 6 or 7 paintings by this one artist whose name escapes me now. And they were all really good. We sold all of them, but decided to keep this one because the green and the red just went so well in this room. Another example of how you just bring modern things in, the things that you love and want to live with, into your decorating. They can all work if you put the time in and the thought to make them work. Everybody is so different. It's so difficult to know. I think if someone said it's so eminently livable, I would find that a very high compliment. I find it eminently livable. It's a place that I'm excited to live in, excited to be in, and when we are away, for instance, if traveling, as we do travel quite a lot with our business, and we spend summers, we have a summer cottage we spend summers at. When you're away and you return and you find yourself so happy to be here, and your eye is delighted to wander from one beautiful thing to another, you find it eminently livable, as everyone's home space should be. So if someone were to say, oh, I find your house to be so wonderful to live in, I would say that would be the greatest compliment.
So this is my desk. It's a wonderful object. It's an early desk with later kind of blue marbleized paint, and it just makes me smile, as does the collection of things that I have on top of it. One of the things that's quite amusing, when I was a little girl and all through my growing up, my mother would say if I was going somewhere, walk on eggs. Walk as though you're walking on eggs. And that kind of evolved into, bye darling, eggs! And as a result, eggs have huge significance in our family, and it's kind of carried on. My mother had one of these wonderful Italian egg stacks. They're really kind of wonderfully decorative. And so I inherited this from her. And it was sort of the beginning of the egg collection fetish all through our lives. Whenever we came up with something that was egg related, it would be a gift. And so we've managed to amass all of these. But I also have a little bit of a fetish with animals and birds. So I have added in all those things. And I really love the contrast of all these early things with modern art again. This is a painting that was actually done by my father, who was an artist and art teacher and an archaeologist. And I love bringing all those colors together. I love the juxtaposition between that and the early still life paintings. That is the thing. It's all about the mix. It's about balance. It's about color. It's about how your eye responds and what really draws joy for you. I mean, for me, looking at all of these things and even looking at them together, it just fills my eye and it gives me such pleasure. It really makes me happy.
One thing that I've always loved, and Dana as well, are still life paintings. And of course, in a kitchen, they go so well because they almost always have food-related themes. These are several that we've come up with over the years. I was so pleased as Punch to find this pair of these. I think they're Spanish still lifes on one occasion, and we quickly acquired them. I think I gave them to Dana as a present. But this one with the fish, the radishes, the cabbage, all these things with a basket. It's in the eggs and these roses. It's just a wonderful thing, and they have their original frames. This is another one that came locally. This came from an old friend, antique dealer. It was without a frame. We put the frame on it. But the fried eggs, we've always both
all
thought
about the eggs.
So silly and charming, and with a little bird on it, which is the European goldfinch. It's probably an Italian painting, and actually it must be because it's got the Chianti bottle with the telltale wicker straw work around the wine bottle there. And this is another one with the fish, which is a mate to this one over here, the Spanish still lifes, with these wonderful, you have cutlery, pieces of fruit, and again the roses, and this really interesting basket here, beautifully done, and a copper pan. They're just charming things, but they go so well in a kitchen, a still life. It's so appropriate to what goes on in a kitchen. So it's a pleasure to have them in this room.
So now we're going to head upstairs. Come on up. So here we are in the primary bedroom, Fritz and my bedroom, which is ensuite with this lovely bathroom. I just have to say something about the color of the trim and the main color in the bathroom, because I love this color so much. It's actually, boringly enough, called light blue, but it has the capacity to change with the light. It's almost like water sometimes, and especially in the bathroom when the sun pours in. I've never had a color that moved me quite so much as this shade of blue. I don't know why. It's just very magical to me.
And it is a Faro and Ball paint.
Yeah, again, this was part of our experiment to use a different brand of paint. I'm not trying to plug them, but nevertheless, it's interesting for people who are interested in their homes. Anyway, here we are, again, just crammed full of everything that we love. I have a kind of particular interest in needleworks, and the tapestry, of course, falls into that category, but also things like these little pieces of crewel work, which are so beautifully done. And what's astonishing about them is, with their age, the color is still so brilliant. And then I have another little needlework over here, and then we have these wonderful portraits. I particularly love this one, and I've never wanted to sell it because it actually looks so much like Fritz did when I first met him. So I always think of it, and he's an artist. He's holding a pencil and he's looking out at the viewer. It's almost as though it may have been a self-portrait. In any case, to me, it's Fritz as a young man. So this four-poster bed is something that we've been dragging around for years, and it's had a lot of different iterations in different houses because we are serial house buyers. We always think of houses as just big antiques, and so collect them all. So we've had lots of houses, and over the years, mainly this has been our bed. And sometimes we have it, you know, draped with amazing tulle, and it looks very dreamy in the summertime. And then in the dark of winter, sometimes we have navy velvet drapes hanging off of it. But being that it's the shoulder season, it's a little naked. But we do have the counterpane at the top, which is literally nothing more than a big chunk of really, really beautiful new fabric that had such a bold pattern. I love the use of pattern on pattern. I love mixing those things, and yet the thing that unifies it is that it's all blue and white in this case. It's sort of a conceit in a way to do all blue and white, but at the same time, you know, it's classic for a reason. So I love the mix of all these things, and it just makes a beautiful bed, but it also creates a kind of acoustic in the room because the fabrics, they kind of absorb sound, and so you walk from the hallway into the bedroom and the sound almost envelops you, or the lack of sound, and it has a softness which makes the bedroom kind of a refuge.
And the bed itself is something that actually we had altered. Because we love the barley twist, which is a real 17th century form, and you don't find these very often. And when we bought this bed, it was actually a single bed and yellow. And so I had our restorer alter it, and it did not have the posts up here, it had finials up here. So we had our restorer make the rails, enlarge the width of the bed, but keeping basically the posts, which was the important part. And then with the superstructure here, from which we suspended these wonderful blue velvet drapes with this wonderful gilt trim, which we have, although we haven't used it lately. And then we got these finials. These are actually wonderful 19th century English tiebacks, which I had him cut down and use as finials for the bed. So they actually have the wonderful early gilt finish that you get from this kind of a thing on what is basically a made-up bed. But the effect is wonderful, and it's about the effect. And so that's how that came up. And we have other things in this room of great note, one of which is a lovely little painting of the Madonna and Child here. French or Belgian, Netherlandish, Low Countries up there, but a just charming painting of the Madonna and Child in early 1600s with a little view out the window there, but a beautiful painting in a period frame as well. And a very large Chinese porcelain painted vase. This size is very hard to find. It's a pleasure to find. And it's very traditional to put them in your fireplaces in the winter, because your fireplaces, of course, in the summer, are pretty dull places in the summer when you don't have a fire going. This is a really wonderful, interesting chest. Latin American, beautifully decorated drawer fronts, and it would originally have been high up on a base with a fall front. And that front has long gone, and they made another base for it at some point. But the beautifully decorated drawer fronts are what remain, as well as its wonderful ironwork. You can see here the little rings that would have had been the attachments for the hooks that would have held the fall front. So it would have been a desk that came down upon which you could write and pull your writing implements out from the drawers.
More importantly, though, Fritz actually bought this at auction, and as so often happens when he comes home with something fabulous, I immediately absconded with it and said, nope, that's not going in the shop, that's coming to our house, that's going to be my chest of drawers. I operate mostly from the gut, and he obviously is the academic around here, but I just felt completely in love with it. It's such a special piece.
I knew she would. I knew when I saw it where it was going.
Destiny. Fritz and I mostly agree about things. Our taste is very closely aligned. I think we're very lucky because not only do we live together for these many years, but we work together daily. But there definitely are times when we don't see eye to eye. I think my taste may run a little bit more rustic and a little bit more eclectic than his does. He tends to have a more scholarly approach and love things not only because they're beautiful, but because of what they are specifically, what's the history, what's this, what's that. So sometimes his academic interest is more powerful than my gut reaction. And sometimes he'll say, oh, this is an amazing XYZ, and it's from here and it's from there. And I just turn and I look at him and I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to live with that. We don't always agree, but by and large we do. It's kind of a miracle. It really is. We love a lot of the same things, and we love a density of decoration, which it could be said that not everybody likes, though at their peril. Anyway, we really enjoy kind of the amassing of a collection, as we talked about before. And we each have sort of specialty things that draw us. Fritz has, old master paintings and drawings are something that he's always loved and been very passionate about. And I love certain ones in a less specific way. I love them because of a facial expression, or like this Madonna and Child behind us here. I love this one because, it's just so soft, and it is so evocative of maternity and of babies. And, I'm not going to stand here and tell you exactly what it is and why I love it. I love it just because it's a beautiful piece of art. And Fritz loves it because it's beautiful, but he also loves things because of what they are and what they tell us about the past. So we collect for different reasons, and we get enthusiastic about different things, but we somehow always manage to meet in the middle. We're very lucky.
Generally is a situation where we both may really admire and be happy to buy something, but whether it ends up in the house is another matter. And a lot of it is there a place for it? Is there a room in which it will go?
Is there a square inch of wall left? Or do we have to trade up or down?
And that can always be a consideration, because if you don't have room for it, if you don't have a spot for it, as much as you love it, it's not always easy to keep it. And
that's the pragmatic side of him that I sometimes have to argue with, because when I fall in love with something, I'll be damned if I'm going to sell it.
A couple things here, just going around the room, because we love these things. There's this wonderful part of a tapestry. It would have been a much larger tapestry, and I don't know what the subject would have been, but there's this dog, this large dog with all this character being embraced by this child, and the look of the two of them, I just think it's absolutely splendid. And again, it has the wonderful tones of early needlework, which you don't get in anything else. The richness, the depth of the tones. Here we have a painting of a woman holding a book. She has a trumpet in her hand, and the book is open, and a scarf on her head with stars. And it's a personification of fame, which is something that they did in the Renaissance and in the 17th century. They would take the attributes of a certain theme, an idea, and make an image that would be a human figure that exemplifies these. So this would be a figure of fame, and she has the trumpet because the trumpet announces the coming of a splendid personage, a famous person. The book, because the famous person is written about. History is written about a person, so she has the book. And the stars in her hair because a famous person is in the heavens and has a celestial part of their character. An Italian in the 1600s, this painting is. Some of the many things that we have and love.
So we're going to take you down and give you a little tour of this wonderful potting shed that Fritz designed this past summer. Unfortunately, of course, it's the fall now, and the beautiful flower beds that led up to it are kind of crispy. But nevertheless, it's worth a peek. Fritz?
Come have a look. It's just a little building, But it's just what I thought should be here in the garden. It's a place to keep the garden tools, a place to keep your seeds, and yet it also is a place where you can sit, you can read a book, you can do whatever you want. You could write a book in this little space. There are 2 entrances. We used old doors and old windows. So you have 2 entrances. You can come in either way, either in the walled garden or out to the yard. And there are wonderful views out to the side here. So to sit in here and enjoy the view is just a splendid thing. You ask what home means to me. Well, that's a hard question, but I have to say home is where you're comfortable, where you live, where you want to be, where you cook your meals, where you invite friends over and enjoy an evening together, where you wake up in the morning and have your morning tea, or step outside and have your morning tea if the weather is fine. Home is where you're comfortable, where you want to be. That's what it means to me.
And for me, home is a place that I draw strength and inspiration. It's the place that I come back to after I've spent all of the fuel I have, and I have the opportunity to look around me and to remember all the things that we've done together and all the things we've collected and all the memories that have passed through the home. And those things are what refuel me. All of the beauty, all of the sort of history that goes into wherever you live. So that, to me, is what home is. Home is where you've built your life, and it's the place that you recharge and get yourself going again.
It's been wonderful to have you. We have a long day ahead.
Lots of antiques to buy.
We have busy lives.
Yes.
I'm sure you do as well. And it's been a pleasure to having you here, Homeworthy.
Thanks for coming. See you again.
Thanks for watching. Go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content and shopping guides.